The following program is made possible by Wells Fargo. Wells Fargo, the next stage.
In some circles, public employees and labor unions have become public enemy number one, while some union leaders say the groups are becoming scapegoats for public debate. The game is politics, and the game is on. I'm Mark Simon. Welcome to the game. There are those who say public employee pension reform is the next big Proposition 13 type wave of public outrage and subsequent reform. Governor Jerry Brown passed a new state pension reform package, and public employees' pension reform measures have turned up on local ballots throughout the region and the state. At the same time, Proposition 32 on the November ballot would dramatically reduce the ability of labor unions to make political contributions. Joining us today to talk about these issues are two of the region's leading labor figures. Shelley Kessler, Executive Secretary Treasurer for the San Mateo County Central Labor Council, the council's leading executive position.
Yep.
Secretary Treasurer always throws people off, but people just call you the boss, right? And then we have Brian O'Neill, who's chair of SEIU 521's Committee on Political Education, the political arm of a union that represents 18,000 workers, including city, county, and school employees. Thank you both for being here. We appreciate your joining us. Start with you, Brian. The public impression, the public perception of public employees has become very negative. Probably not as low as the legislature, but awfully close. And a lot of it is driven by what they think are benefit packages that are too generous. Within the ranks, how are public employees feeling? Are they feeling put upon? Are they feeling that this is unfair?
Well, yeah, within the ranks, they do feel it's unfair because they feel like they're being attacked. And it's because they were all hired. A lot of them have been hired since the 80s and have been working hard, playing by the rules, and then all of a sudden, our benefits have become a big issue with them. And the problem is that these things happen because of the financial crash in 2008, and that boiled everything over. And that caused everybody to wonder, well, why do you have a pension? Why do you have your benefits, your health care, and I don't? And so then, again, usually during financial crisis, there are scapegoats, and that's what's happening right now.
Shelley, historically, the premise for public employees was they got paid a little less, but they had a little better job security and they had a little bit better benefits because there was value in having public employees who developed institutional knowledge stayed put. There are people who think that that balance isn't where it was, that salaries have gone up competitive with the private sector, and that's part of what's thrown the public employee pay and benefits balance out of whack.
But that's not necessarily true. And part of the issue that came up when people were first being brought into the public sector is we did not have the ability to recruit and retain quality, competent, professional people to do the public service.
Because there was such demand in the private sector that they were going there.
Right, and during the dot-com bubble, lots of people with high skills went into the private sector, made a lot of money, and they're the ones who, lost their jobs. All the while, the public sector people who could have been in that private sector, who could have been making better bucks, remained committed to their communities. They stayed at a lower wage with the promise of the pension or the benefit package in order for them to be able to serve the community. And we as taxpayers, and we as the public expect and would hope that in order for our communities to really survive and thrive, that we have employees on the clock that are doing our service, whether it's fire or the librarians or the teachers. Those are the people who are providing the quality of life that we, especially in San Mateo County, have been able to really enjoy.
But the question is their pay, and I gather that there's some validity to the idea the public employee pay rose some because of the competitive atmosphere for the job market.
There was, during the dot-com boom in the 90s and probably the early 2000s, there was a lot of enhancements done because it was so competitive. Management was coming to our labor unions and asking, hey, let's talk, because we have so many vacancies, we need to have a pay raise, and certain classifications need higher pay.
And it's astonishing that you didn't say no to a pay increase.
Right. But I'd just like to let you know now, ever since 2008, there have been a lot of furloughs, a lot of give-backs, pay a lot more for pensions, and pay a lot for health care. So we have a cut back. It just may not be shown in the wages, and then it depends on who you're comparing it to. Now, a manufacturer in Silicon Valley makes $134,000 a year because it's a highly technical skill. But most of our people that we represent, they make somewhere between $50,000 and $60,000 a year. So I don't see that being outrageous.
And also the average pension that people get is around $30,000 to $40,000. It's not like it's a huge amount when you have CEOs and other people are making how much, Brian?
Oh, like Tim Cook at Apple, $400 million.
So how much is enough, you know? And these people really aren't getting outrageous pensions that they themselves have paid into.
The question isn't whether someone who runs a multi-million-dollar company gets paid a lot. The question right now is about pensions and public employee pay. Let's talk about pensions a little bit, because there's been a huge deal made about public employee pensions, probably more focused in the safety area than anywhere else, where you have some fire and police officials retiring at 50, 55 with virtually the full amount they're making. Then they go get another job, and the next thing you know, they're making a lot of money. The governor passed this pension reform package. Among the things it does is require employees to pay into their pension. It's called 50% of the normal cost, up to 50%. What is the normal cost? What does that mean?
Well, normal cost is what it costs to pay currently the pensions for employees right now.
So, but the employees aren't paying 50% of their total pension cost, are they?
Well, the unfunded liability is the other part, and that's the part that's is based on projections on how, and it gets changed every so often when you look at the actuarial studies, because sometimes people, sometimes I guess people are living longer, or the factors they brought in that were related to the normal costs have changed.
Yeah. But what we're talking about is a percentage of the total. There's an employee share of the pension.
Right.
Which isn't 100%.
Right.
It's a substantially smaller share, and employees now are being asked to pay a percentage of that percent. As I understand it, it's somewhere in the neighborhood of 7 to 10%, depending on where you work. Is that about right?
That's about right.
That doesn't sound like a lot. Why is that objectionable?
Well, I think the objectionable part about it is that it was imposed on all state employees, county employees, city, local. It was not negotiated with each union. Mm-hmm. So that's the objection. We have been working, a lot of unions that we represent do already pay half the normal cost. Some of us pay some of the employer costs, and we're going to probably switch over to the employee costs. So, but it was all done through negotiations. Mm-hmm. And so that's what we object. Like, you just skipped over it, you said this is the way it is, take it or leave it.
I guess the argument would be that if you tried to negotiate this, it wouldn't work, that it wouldn't drive down the cost of these pensions the way people clearly think it needed to be. Well,
you're looking at a time frame from really 2008 was the bottom, and that was the time bomb that blew up everything. No one expected it. And so before that, we were all 90, 100, 110% overfunded. Okay. Now, all of a sudden,
let me stop you there. We're going to take a quick break. We'll come back on this topic. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
It's been over 150 years since Wells Fargo first opened for business. Since then, we've enjoyed your community support, and we're passionate about returning it. Every day, Wells Fargo team members roll up their sleeves and donate their time to organizations and charitable groups throughout the Bay Area. Nationally, we've committed even more. In just the past 2 years alone, we've donated over $70 million to support schools and educational programs. It's a commitment we're proud of. Wells Fargo, the next stage.
Welcome back to the game. Our guests today are Brian O'Neill of SEIU 521, one of the leading public employee labor unions in the region, 18,000 members, including city, county, and school employees, and Shelley Kessler, who's the Secretary-Treasurer, but really the boss of the San Mateo County Central Labor Council. We were talking about pension reform, and it gets back to the topic that opened the show. Why is it public employee pensions that are such the target?
Well, those pensions are what's being put in the news as part of an overall attack that's going on working people, and especially people in unions.
We do hear a lot of stories, pretty outlandish ones, about people spiking their salary at the last year and that's the basis for their pension. These percentages, 3% at 50 or 3% at 55, which means you get 3% of your pay for every year you've been there. If you've been there 30 years, you're retiring with 90% of your salary.
So we reward the people who have had a long-term commitment to serving the community and providing the emergency or the necessary services to create a good quality of life for the people in the community by giving them an opportunity to live in decency for their latter years, especially when, as you and everyone else knows, as you get older, your medical needs go up generally. And so we want to recruit, retain, and reward people who have served our communities and give them dignity in their retirement. That's an okay thing to fight for.
But what we're doing is rewarding people in that way only public employees. The fact is private employees don't have to worry about whether or not they're going to pay 7 or 10% of their share of their pension. They're paying 100% of it. Well,
that's not necessarily true.
Most of the private places I've ever worked, and I've worked at a few, you don't get an employer contribution. That was true maybe 30 years ago, but now people are paying 100% of their pensions.
Right.
Brian.
Well, there's a couple of things. One, 401ks were never intended to be replace defined benefit plans. 401ks were temporary and was really for IBMers that made a bunch of money. Bonuses, and they wanted to figure out a way to defer taxes. Somehow that became the going thing, and also because there's so much mobility. There is like 6.3 million Californians that have no private pensions at all that work. They have none at all. And 50% of middle income people in California that are going to retire, they're going to retire in poverty. And so there's something that has to be done about that. And a 401k isn't going to solve it. Now, part of us worked in SEIU and other unions, came together and got SB 1234 passed, and that's Retirement Security for All. And what it is the governor's just signed it, and it's going to provide the steps to begin having some kind of retirement for these private sector workers that have no retirement at all. It's going to give them a program that they can put in 3% or more, or their employer can, and it's going to be portable. So that's where we should be doing. Instead of attacking someone that has it, that was just because they got a job in the 90s and in the 2000s during the height of the economy, and now because of the crash, which is again caused by big business and Wall Street, and it affected everybody. I mean, affected revenues from state, affected the stock market and the pensions. It all came down, and now comes the second part. Well, the reason why we're having problems, those public employees' pensions. These are Wall Street, Fox News people. That's what they've been saying for years. It's those unions. Those are the ones that are causing all of our problems. And so that's why it's coming down to this. We're talking about this now.
Mm-hmm. And bear in mind, when the bailouts happened, they bailed out the auto industry, they bailed out the banks, but they didn't have any strings attached that said, we're going to bail out you, the bank, but we want to make sure that you help the people who are underwater in their mortgages, right? So the priorities that were done in the moments of those bailouts to help keep the economy alive went to the people who were already part of the reason why it went down. It did not go to the people who spent their lives working every day, showing up, providing for themselves and their family and their communities. So when we say that people deserve a pension, private or public sector, because they should live in dignity in their latter years, we think that's true for everybody. So what Brian just said is really important, that we raise the ground or the level for everyone to have the ability to live in dignity. And the fact that these people are making so much money, and yeah, they're heads of corporations and they should make a fair wage, but the fact is the people who earn them those profits should also be able to earn a fair wage or benefit or pension.
I want to live in dignity here. It's a nice little town just south of Vacaville. Let's talk about the rest of the reform package, because the other thing it did is, and this is all essentially it's implementing a two-tier system.
Right.
New employees are going to have to stay at the job longer. They're going to have to contribute more to their pensions. And I know that 2 tiers is something that unions have been fighting against for years. Is it something where it's just the way it's going to have to be from now on, or is that something you think still needs to be undone?
Well, this was again imposed on us too. So
Right.
the second tier is automatic starting January. Any new employee that has CalPERS is going to be under that second tier. And so they have always said that this will save money. It does, but it takes over 20 years to really get the real big savings. And so we would always try to bargain it. I mean, we tried in a lot of places to bargain it, but in a way that it would protect existing workers. Okay, if you're going to do this, how about not laying off any of our workers? And so it ended up that they always wanted to impose. So then it becomes into a competitive. And is that competitive with hiring new employees? And I no one's really been out there trying to hire new employees, really. It's been kind of like, Band-Aids, and we'll let some people go and we'll just eliminate their jobs. So it's going to be interesting to see, once the economy recovers, if that second tier is going to hold, if it's not going to be melded together because it's not competitive.
And one of the problems with the 2 tiers, and by the way, just for people who may not know this county already has not just 1, but 3 tiers that are in place at the county level already. And so when you have people doing the same job side by side, getting disparate amounts of salary or benefits, it really creates a real problem of morale, and it also makes people who are doing the same job not as willing to put in as much effort. It undermines people's ability to really give their full 100% to do the job, because they're getting paid less than the person sitting next to them, and that's just not fair. So I have to say, Brian's saying this for the Service Employees Union, but for any union that has to suffer the 2-tier environment, we should always strive to bring to eliminate any of the tiered system, so that it's a level playing field for all the workers, so they all feel compelled to really do what they need to do to provide for their services and their jobs.
Let me stop you there. We're going to take another break. Don't go away. And you stick around too. We'll be right back.
It's been over 150 years since Wells Fargo first opened for business. Since then, we've enjoyed your community support, and we're passionate about returning it. Every day, Wells Fargo team members roll up their sleeves and donate their time to organizations and charitable groups throughout the Bay Area. Nationally, we've committed even more. In just the past 2 years alone, we've donated over $70 million to support schools and educational programs. It's a commitment we're proud of. Wells Fargo, the next stage.
Welcome back to the game. We're talking public employees, pensions, unions. We have here Brian O'Neill, the chair of the COPE, Committee on Political Action Education for SEIU 521. Basically, it's the political arm of one of the region's leading unions. And Shelley Kessler, who's the secretary-treasurer for the San Mateo County Central Labor Council. We've been talking about public employee pensions. I should say, for the sake of full disclosure, I'm a public employee. I work for Samtrans, which is a public agency, and I'm part of the CalPERS system that we've been talking about. Hopefully I can get out before these reforms hit. Let's talk about Proposition 32, which is, I know it's the second, it might be the third attempt. It's the third attempt on the ballot to curtail the ability of unions to spend their membership dues. At one point, there was a ballot measure that was essentially requiring you to ask them how you'd spend it. Now it's just saying you can't have access to those funds at all. It's positioned as a campaign finance reform, and everybody's for campaign finance reform. What's wrong with Prop 32, Shelley?
It actually only reforms against unions. The very same people who have created this reform, quote unquote, which is a scam, have exempted themselves from being subject to the very reform that's being promoted.
Well, they haven't exempted themselves so much as they're prohibiting a fundraising activity that they don't use, right? I mean,
well, they don't. Most corporations do not have dues, do not have members that actually participate and vote and determine where those monies get spent. So when you have a Walmart, for example, or you have a Meg Whitman, for example, that can spend copious amounts of money, or they pay into a super PAC that has no ability, we have no ability to know who has put in how much money, or this guy Munger who just put another $10 million in yesterday. They can spend as much money as they want without any kind of accountability to an organization. Whereas for the labor community, we are accountable to our members. They vote and help make determinations about where we spend the money, how we spend the money, to whom it gets spent. And so, and it's not just about unions. The fact is that when the labor community or our allies engage in political activity, we are advocating things that benefit the community as a whole. So if we're talking about health and safety on the job, if we're talking about providing services for response personnel, for emergency response like police and fire, when we're talking about being able to have teacher ratios or nursing ratios that either provide a good educational environment for our children or a good healthcare environment for those of us who unfortunately may wind up in a medical facility, those are things that benefit the entire community. So it's not just an attack on the labor community, it's an attack on our organized ability to help level the playing field for political voice, but it also attacks the very issues that we advocate that benefit the community as a whole.
But Brian, if we're going to reform politics, certainly you could have a lot of objections about the way corporate money is spent. The Citizens United decision that essentially said corporations have the same free speech rights as human beings is one that still has a lot of people scratching their heads. But if you're going to reform the process, labor unions are certainly one of the major spenders as well. Shouldn't the argument, if you're going to reform the process, why not start here?
Right. Well, but this reform is not fair. It really does not do what it's supposed to do. What it does is silence working people. We do not spend nearly as much as all the corporations spend, like AT&T on that they can spend, or PG&E what they spend on that solar, trying to prevent us from doing solar. So I think the problem with this bill is the exemptions are so wide open that a CEO can write a check because he's an individual, or the treasurer of a big company can write a check because they don't collect dues from their employees. They can do this. And so this is going to exempt so many people and the rich, and this is exactly what happened in Wisconsin. And I think what's happening with this, it's an overreach. You are trying to silence unions, and eventually people say, well, wait a minute. Unions were good because they got minimum wage. They got the 8-hour day. They got me overtime. So once we are silenced as working people, then you're going to start seeing all about sick leave and minimum wage and overtime pay all start being eliminated.
That's why we have this lovely little flyer that talks about the very things we're going to lose: sick leave, a voice at work, living wages and benefits, health and safety. I mean, whether or not you have a union on the job, you want to have a safe work environment.
Are union political contributions on a par, not in terms of amount, but in terms of their origin and nature, to say a corporate political contribution? I mean, if I wanted to make this law fair, would I perhaps require a corporation not to be able to donate until they've checked with their shareholders? Or is there an equivalency way of inhibiting corporations that would make something like this fair? Well,
I mean, I don't understand that problems about money being the issue, because we want to be able to have get out the message too, as much as corporations get out the message. And so I think what happened is once they said that corporations were human beings, which I haven't seen one being eliminated or in the death penalty, receive a death penalty yet. But I don't know. I don't think we're looking for. Well, we want to stop corporations and unions. We want something that's fair, okay, that at least allows us to keep giving our voice out, because somebody needs to do that, and the only way we can do it is collectively.
Well, we were already outspent 15-1.
I want to get something. That's an important statistic, but there's a distinct difference between corporation and union activities in how they originate too, isn't there? Give me a real brief explanation, because we're running out of time, of how a union decides how to allocate its funds. is that decision made by an executive committee at an arbitrary level? Because in corporations, the CEO can decide to spend the money and it's spent.
Exactly. So in our instance, what we do is we have COPE committees. Okay, so we have a COPE committee in San Mateo County. And so there are members that contribute.
And they're elected by their own membership from each
Well, no, they can join. We can have, anybody can be in that committee. It's open to all members and anybody. And we let them know. We have meetings usually once a month at the same time. And then we decide who we're going to endorse. We have town hall meetings, and then we have election of our members there. And then once we decide on who we're going to endorse, we go to the Labor Council and we work with them to get them to endorse our candidate. And then once the Labor Council and us are in agreement, then we start contributing money.
We've got a minute left. You can have the last word.
Okay, well, that's specific to one union, but in the labor community as a whole, we allocate only a penny a member per month that we get in dues that goes to the political process, which is very similar for the Labor Council with 110 unions, to be able to help decide collectively how we spend that money. That money is not spent in the same way as a CEO that allows it. Now, some people say we need public reform, public financing, but when you look at the organizations like the League of Women Voters, Common Cause, some of the other organizations, Equality California, Public Citizen, these organizations recognize that this is unfair in the way that it's being done.
Okay,
we have multiple newspapers that also oppose it.
I got to stop you there. Thank you very much. Whether you're for or against it, Prop 32, I think is clearly not what it purports to be. And that's the game. Thanks for being with us, and join us next time.